Welcome back to Blended Scotch Reviews by Stab the Dragon Productions for episode number 41. Today is Sunday, December 14th, 2025, and I'm coming to you from Fort Worth, Texas, where it is currently 41 degrees and sunshiny. I've been conducting a survey and tournament of some of the basic blended Scotch whiskies over the past year. We are currently in the midst of our second family, Feud, as we look at the famous Grouse family of blends and conduct some one-on-one competition to see which of the Grouse is my favorite. We looked at the famous Grouse, which came in third in the tournament, and then Ruby Cask, which came in last. Bourbon Cask won runner-up, and Smoky Black Grouse won the tournament. However, the Naked Malt called up and said, well, what about me? I'm part of the Grouse family. Don't I deserve a seat at the bar? So we thought, well, this is a blended malt and all the others are blended scotches. So is this even going to be a fair fight? Well, guess what? It has been a fair fight. Against the famous Grouse, blended malt, Naked Malt lost. It won against the Ruby Cask, but then against Bourbon Cask, it lost again. So today, it's going to be Smoky Black against Naked Malt. This will be the last of the famous Grouse family in this competition. So what are the rules? I compare these two whiskeys with the same criteria by which I've reviewed them all, but the real deciding factor is going to be nose, taste, mouthfeel, burn, and finish. Simply put, which one do I like to drink the most? Now, if there's a tie, and that has happened sometimes in the past, then we look at price, value, and availability to see who the tiebreaker is. Okay. Also, just for fun, I do try to guess which whiskey is in which glass at the end, because I use blacked out glasses here. Now, on the bottom is a number on each glass. Number 1 will be the Smoky Black. Number 2 will be the Naked Malt. Sometimes I give the winner a cocktail, but here in the wintertime, I'm not big on cocktails. So, we'll see. Just the facts. Naked Malt cost me about $31, and this is a blended malt scotch, meaning there's no single grain whiskeys in here, just 4 or 5 blended, or 4 or 5 malts. The whiskey has no age statement, and its proof is a very nice 86. The famous Grouse Smoky Black is a blended scotch, so it's got single grain and single malt whiskeys in here. The whiskeys in both of these include Highland Park, the Macallan, Glenrothes, and Glenturret. Glenturret has some peated whiskey, which is probably in this one, and Glenturret also has non-peated whiskey, which would be in this one. Neither one of these has an age statement, and the black, Smoky Black, comes in at 80 proof, and they cost about the same. Actually, this one, it's got $29.99 on the sticker. I'm not sure where I got this, because goody, it's now about $32. So actually, Smoky Black and Naked are a little bit outside the price range for the tournament, but I bent the rules for these two, so there you go. The blended Scotch tournament is $30 and below is what my basic goal was for that tournament. And both of these are just over that, and they're part of the famous Grouse family, so there we go. All right, history. Coming out of Perth, Scotland, Gloag's Perth whiskey was changed in 1896 to Grouse whiskey, and then in 1905 they changed it again to the famous Grouse. Now, the expression here, the Naked Malt, originally was called Naked Grouse, and it started in 2011. But in 2021, they changed it to Naked Malt. And some sources indicate that prior to that change, it was a blended Scotch, but when it became Naked Malt, it was just blended malt. But the Edrington Group sold off the whole Grouse line to William Grant & Sons in late 2024, early 2025. So Smoky Black got its start in 2015. But that was actually a rebranding. This was preceded by what was called the Black Grouse, dating back to 2007. So for history, Smoky Black wins, as it's the older of the two. Bottle, label, and marketing. Now, I get the idea behind the simple bottle here and the almost non-existent label, because naked, you want just the bare bones, right? There you go. But the Smoky Black Grouse has got a nice bottle, just like all the other Grouse Eye. It's got a great label. I love the Black Grouse on the label. And the color scheme with the Black Grouse. I mean, you got the black and gold, you got the black and then the red tip on the cap, just like Famous Grouse does. This is actually an oddity on this bottle. None of the other Grouse Eye have this metal fiddly bit here on the neck. This is the only one that had metal on the neck. So I think that's true. Let me pull out Bourbon Grouse real quick. No, actually, I guess they all do. There you go. Okay. All right, my bad. All right, so bottle, label, and marketing. You know, there's a little bit more on the internet for Naked Malt. There's really nothing much out there for Smoky Black. But all in all, the bottle and label, I'm going to give the win to the Smoky Black. Appearance of these two whiskeys, though, it is very clear that the malt wins. It's a little bit darker. Now, part of the problem is the Smoky Black. I think the glass is lightly tinted. I'm not entirely sure about that, but I think it's lightly tinted. But the Naked Malt is the darker of the two, so it wins the appearance, because I tend to prefer darker whiskeys. Composition. Most blended scotches have got 30 to 40 scotches in the mix, you know, between malts and single grains. I've got no idea how many different whiskeys are in Famous Grouse. But I do know that the single malts include Highland Park, Macallan, Glen Ross, and Glen Turret. And obviously for the Smoky Black, you've got the Smoky Glen Turret. And then Naked Malt probably just has the regular Glen Turret. So, you know, blended malts in some ways are simpler than blended scotches, because you've got fewer ingredients and they're all malted. So there you go. But nonetheless, a lot of people say blended malts are more premium than blended scotches. And I guess I get that, but you know, that's why we're doing this contest, right? It's to see which I like the most. And so far, the blended scotches are winning. So that's in the Grouse family, whatever. But as far as composition go, neither of these has an age statement. This is 86 proof and this is 80 proof. So Smoky Black is peated, and the Naked Malt here is not peated, but it's got a heavy wine influence from the Macallan. And you really get that. I mean, there's definitely a fruity nose and a fruity taste to the Naked Malt. But the peat, I mean, I'm kind of a peat head. So this is almost apples and oranges. So this will be very difficult to say who's the winner going to be, but I lean towards the peat. So for composition, though, I'm going to declare a tie. All right, let's now go to the whiskeys. I have mixed these up thoroughly, and I will nose these left to right, but I'm here to tell you that I'm going to be able to tell the difference on the nose, and as far as which is which, because one of them's peated and one of them's not. And then when I do the taste, this is where it gets difficult. Normally, I would prefer to taste lower proof to higher. Do the lower proof first, because that higher proof is going to wreck the lower proof. But in this case, with the lower proof being peated, it may wreck the higher proof. So I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine how this is going to turn out. So let's start with the one on the left. Now, when I say that Smoky is peated, it is not heavily peated. And right there, I'm not sure which whiskey is in that glass. I didn't smell the peat, and I didn't smell the fruit. Let's try the one on the right. I'm thinking I'm getting the wine on this one. But the one on the left, the nose is just weak. So I'm going to say the one on the right wins the nosing. It's got the more going on with the nose. More inviting. So I will start tasting with the one on the left. That is definitely the smoky black. The peat smoke doesn't hit you right away. The mid palate it starts, and the back palate it gets strong, and the finish it stays strong. So this has, a mild, sweet, malty taste up front, and then the smoke starts rolling in and builds. This is one of my favorites. I mean, this is really good. So yeah, just a little bit of sweet and malty up front. But otherwise, it's all about the peat for the rest of the way. So, yeah, okay, we know that that's glass number one then. Now, how can I get rid of this peat smoke? I don't want to get rid of the peat smoke. Has a long finish. Mouthfeel, medium. Not much burn going on there, but the finish is definitely strong and lasting. All right, we'll try the one on the right, which is going to be the Naked Malt. Yeah, the mouthfeel is a little bit better. Burn is a little bit better. As far as the taste, again, this is a case where the first whiskey wrecks the second whiskey. And this happened yesterday, too, with the bourbon cask. The first one I tasted was the bourbon cask, and it wrecked the taste of the Naked Malt. Even though I rinsed my mouth out. So, going off of taste, clearly, the one on the left wins. Mouthfeel, burn, and finish. Again, I'm going to say the one on the left, although the one on the right does have the richer mouthfeel and the burn. So, I don't know. I mean, that's going to be about a tie. But see, this is where it gets hard. Now, that second sip was better. I get more of the wine finishing going on there. more of the maltiness. So, but the finish with the one on the left is just long lasting. I mean, that peat smoke lingers. So, you know, I'm going to have to stay with the one on the left, and that's going to be my winner. And it's easily identified. The one on the left is glass number 1, Smoky Grouse, Smoky Black. There it is. And the one on the right is number 2, the Naked Malt. So we have a clear winner. And but see, this is a case of apples and oranges. And I learned this doing, I did a couple of years ago, I did a contest of Texas rye whiskeys. And there's 2 different styles of Texas ryes. You've got one style that emphasizes the Texas funk, what our climate does to the whiskey in the barrel. But there's ways to ameliorate that and lessen that. So you had some that was strong funk and some that was not. And I learned pretty quickly that you really can't compare the two. They're 2 very different whiskeys. And so that's what I'm experiencing with Scotch, is peated whiskeys play right to me. I mean, I'm a peat head. And whiskeys like this one, fruity, malty, delicious, but they don't hold up against peat. So, you know, it's almost like, well, on one day I want the peat, and on the next day I don't want the peat. But if I do a competition between the two, the peat's going to pretty much win every time. And that's just how it is. So Smoky Black for the win. And I was easily able to identify which is which. So this was the easiest of the contest, really. You introduce smoke to the contest, and it's just not a fair fight. But see, people thought, well, you do a blended malt against a blended Scotch. That's not a fair fight. Well, guess what? Naked here, out of the 4 other famous Grouses, only beat 1, Ruby Cask. It lost all the other rounds. There you go. So I don't buy that argument that says automatically blended malts are better. All right, price, value, and availability, though. Let's look at that. The prices were very similar. I got this one for $29.99 and this one for $31 and change. But now, you know, when I'm looking around, or the price on a Smoky Black now is like more like $32. So they're really close. Availability goes to the Smoky Black. Smoky Black is much more available than Naked Malt. So it would win on that count as well. All right, we have this winner. Now, do I do a cocktail? Here's the deal with Scotch and me. The only kind of cocktails I like with Scotch are with peated Scotches. You know, I've done some with 7-Up or ginger ale with a non-peated Scotch, and they were okay. But when it's chilly like this, when it's cold, I'm not a big fan of iced cocktails when I'm cold. But nonetheless, I can do a cocktail with this that's pretty decent, but, you know, like a Rusty Nail or Godfather. You mix this with an amaretto like Di Serono for a Godfather, or you mix it with Drambuie for a Rusty Nail, and this comes out to be a pretty darn good cocktail. But I'm not going to do that today because it's like 41 degrees and I'm cold. So, all right, what's coming up next? This will be the last blended Scotch review for a few months. We have really focused on that recently. So coming up, I've got a lot of history to look at, some movies and books to review, and then as I did last winter, I'm going to look at some Canadian whiskeys because it's cold. To me, Canadian whiskeys and cold weather go together. And then I'm going to get back into my rye tournament, which has been languishing in the background for several months. I started it and then focused on blended scotches and haven't got back to it really. And then in March, maybe a brief look at some Irish whiskeys. And then after that, we'll return to the blended scotches. So for now, for Blended Scotch Reviews, this is Stab the Dragon out here.